Hi guys, Dan here, and today I'm going to be talking about A Meeting at Corvallis by S.M. Stirling. And this is the third and final book in the Dies the Fire trilogy, which is the first trilogy in the 15-book long Emberverse series. And this is an alternate history novel in a post-apocalyptic setting. It's got elements of sci-fi and fantasy mixed into it as well. I've already done reviews of the first two books in the series, and I also did like an introduction to the series with sort of suggested, well, not really suggested reading order, but anyway, I did an introduction to the series video as well, so feel free to check any of them out if you want. I'll try and remember to put links in the description. So yeah, in this book, it's 10 years after the change, which is a global event that knocked out all kinds of modern technology, so electronics, gunpowder, internal combustion engines, a bunch of other technologies all just stopped working. Nobody knows why. But yeah, so this is what happened in the first book in the series, and we pick up 10 years after that, and pretty soon after the events of the second book, which is called The Protector's War. And we follow the survivors of this big global catastrophe in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, and they formed these like really distinct communities with really interesting characteristics, including the Clan Mackenzie, which is led by Juniper Mackenzie, the Bear Killers, which are led by Mike Havel, and the Portland Protective Association, or the PPA, which is led by Norman Arminger, who's he's the bad guy, the evil warlord. Yeah, so throughout the second book, there was kind of a war that sit between these communities, or between the PPA and the rest of the communities, and this war seemed really imminent, but it was held off as the Clan Mackenzie were fortuitously able to capture Norman Arminger's daughter and heir. But in this book, A Meeting at Corvallis, the sort of fragile peace is on the verge of being shattered, and war is again on the horizon. So yeah, if you've seen my other reviews of the books in this series, you'll know that I'm a massive fan of this. And as in those books, the characters and their relationships in this one are really well developed. But in contrast to the first two books, and quite interestingly, I think, in this one, we get a lot more of the sort of bad guys' point of views. So we see much more of Norman Arminger than we saw in the first couple of books. We get the point of view of his wife, Sandra, as well, who is a very influential and sort of conniving figure. We also get some point of views from some of their sort of military leaders as well. Conrad Renfrew, for example, he's a really good foil for Arminger. But for me, the highlight in terms of this was Tiffany Rutherton's character. She's one of the bad guys. She is Sandra Arminger's hitman, or hitwoman, and she's got a great backstory, loads of layers to her personality, and it was always really you look forward to reading her POV sections. We also see much more of Ruby Mackenzie, who is he's a kid. He's Juniper and Mike's kid. They're not actually together. This is from like a fling that they had in the first year after the change. It happened in the first book. They hooked up for one night, and then Juniper had this kid, Rudy. And to be honest, he can be pretty annoying because he's one of these characters that is just super good at everything, to a level that's well above even all the other hyper-capable people in this book. But he plays a massive part going forward in the series, and he's a really important character for the mythology that Stirling is trying to create in this series. I'll talk a bit more about the mythology later. Yeah. The narrative starts relatively slowly, but picks up after the first third of the book, and then in the middle we start hitting some really strong action beats after an initial phase of sort of diplomatic manoeuvring, you know, and Stirling then sort of slows it down again a bit after these, you know, after the action heavy middle, before like careering straight into the final climactic struggle that we've been building up to for basically the entire series, the entire trilogy. As ever, Stirling combines historical ideas with some really neat adaptations that the survivors have sort of managed to put together. You know, stuff like they use like these quick reloading crossbows. They've got like their riverboats that they're pedal powered, siege equipment that's powered by hydraulics, like prefabricated castles that they sort of drag around on massive wagons. Yeah, and also his descriptions of the different communities are, you know, as in the other two books, just like utterly fascinating, and you really want to get deep into how these communities operate. And also, you know, it's the third book in the series, and Stirling does a real good job of bringing like the narrative and character arcs to good, satisfying conclusions, whilst like also setting up the next books in the series, but without leaving a bunch of loose ends. You know, it's not like he leaves you on a cliffhanger or anything. They're all the plot threads and the character threads are all really nicely tied up, but you still want to keep reading to see how these people and how these communities and the cultures that they're forming continue to adapt to this new world. Right, now, I said I was going to talk about some of the mythology that Stirling creates in this series, and it really is a mythology that he's working on here. He's been Stirling has been really strongly hinting at this aspect throughout the first two books of the series, but he makes it completely clear what angle he's coming from towards the end of this book, A Meeting at Corvallis, when he overtly references the idea of sacred kingship, which is like where the king is linked to the land and the people and fertility and general good luck, you know, good fortune. And this notion sort of also contains the idea that the king should be like a willing sacrifice for the land, you know, for the good of the land or the good of the people. There's this idea that in order for the land to thrive and for the land and the people to be fertile, then the king has to die and be sacrificed to achieve that. And this is a theme that's quite significant in some ancient mythologies, but yet also in the past, or so it has been claimed anyway. This idea was also linked with the idea of a superseding like female theocratic role, which was also linked with fertility as well, and it's like a development of that. And these two roles, you know, the sacred king and the sort of mother goddess, the fertility goddess, are portrayed in this series by Mike Cable and Juniper Mackenzie, which I guess kind of makes this trilogy a retelling of a story that is literally older than history itself, but, you know, placed in this really unique setting that Stirling has created. So yeah, I mean, I'm not like an expert on ancient mythology or anything, but I do enjoy reading about it. But if you do want to know any more about the mythological elements that Stirling incorporates into the series, then your best starting point is with this book. There you go, that is, I don't know if you can see that. I can't really get that to focus properly, but yeah, anyway, this is The Golden Bough by J.G. Fraser. The Golden Bough, A Study in Magic and Religion. And this is like a classic anthropological study, and it covers a lot of the themes that Stirling incorporates into the series. I mean, it's a bit hefty, I mean, it's a pretty thick book. But you don't need to read the whole thing cover to cover. It's got like a pretty comprehensive contents page or contents pages, so you can sort of look through, see which bits you're interested in, and it's normally just you'll pick it up and just read a few pages here and there. So it's really good for that. And also another classic on the subject is this book, or these books rather. They're 2 volumes by the same guy. This is the lighting is no good. There you go. Just about got that. The Greek Myths. The Greek Myths 1 and The Greek Myths 2. Both of them by Robert Graves. And this is written later than The Golden Bough, and it's heavily influenced by it. And it's also really influential in its own right. It's got a couple of hundred Greek myths in there, and really interesting commentaries on them that again touch on a lot of the sort of same themes that Stirling is putting throughout his stories. If you read this series and you was more interested in the post-apocalyptic sci-fi aspect of it than the mythology, then you could try there you go, The Postman by David Brin. Sci-fi classic. There's a film with Kevin Costner in that you can check out as well, which is vaguely entertaining, the same name. But this is classic sci-fi, and post-apocalyptic, rebuilding civilization type story. Another one in a similar vein is there you go, Sci-Fi Masterworks. There you go, Sci-Fi Masterworks. Earth Abides by George R. Stewart. Again, that's in a similar vein, rebuilding society after a massive collapse of civilization. So yeah, A Meeting at Corvallis by S.M. Stirling. Really satisfying conclusion to a thoroughly enjoyable trilogy, and absolutely recommended. So yeah, bye.